Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Adil Raja. I welcome you to Soldier Speaks English. And today I've got a special guest with me, Eric Sperling. Eric, welcome to the show. And Eric, would you like to introduce yourself to my audience, please?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. My name is Eric Sperling. I'm the executive director of Just Foreign Policy. I've been working on U.S. policy towards Pakistan now for many years. Particularly since the stolen election. And I'm a former congressional staffer for members that tend to be progressive, but often do collaboration across the political spectrum to end wars and support diplomacy. So.
Thank you, Eric, for joining us. Eric, once you say the election which were stolen, you're talking about the Pakistani election, I believe, and the drop site news story which featured the Commonwealth report have actually established the fact that Pakistani elections were indeed stolen, and they were stolen by a military dictator and a de facto ruler of Pakistan, who is now Trump's favorite field marshal. So in a way, and he's also his mediator in Iran war. Now, whatsoever is going on over there, we'll come to that. But by calling Asim Munir his favorite field marshal, don't you think that Trump is empowering dictatorship in Pakistan, as U.S. establishment has done in the past as well? But Trump in particular is legitimizing an illegitimate regime in Pakistan, whereas he came to power with the promises of restoring democracy in Pakistan and restoring the popular leader Imran Khan, for whom 90% of the people of Pakistan voted for. But Trump did exactly opposite that, and and there's a lot of rumors and allegations about personal wheeling dealing with his family, crypto deals, and the Roosevelt Hotel deal going around. But once a U.S. president calls a dictator is a favorite field marshal, how does it play out, and how is it being seen in the power corridors of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, well, I think, to the average person who cares about democracy, or who has some basic sense of kind of what decent government looks like, to call someone your favorite field marshal, it's almost an oxymoron, right? The idea that you could have a favorite field marshal, I think anyone just looking at that with the basic awareness says, well, this is pretty disturbing. But I think it really reflects the success of essentially that long-standing DC bureaucracy at the State Department and in the intelligence services in the United States that was really seeking to try to avoid that outcome that obviously much of the Pakistani American diaspora community was hoping for, largely resulting from Rick Grinnell's essentially is what appeared to be promises or commitments that he could follow through on, and then ultimately, I think what we saw was what many of us feared, which is that those forces that are in DC we're going to work to try to avoid that, try to get Trump in, working closely with the regime there, and it seemed to be successful. I mean, everyone's seen the photos of Asim Munir showing the minerals that could have, that now we've seen the reports obviously of the Witkoff connections, and even though there was even earlier attempts, Trump. So this is a long-standing thing. They know Trump's not particularly committed ideologically, and if you can get his eye, on a different prize, he can kind of start looking that way. And I think they're feeling pretty good about that. But I think for those who have basic awareness of Pakistan, it's pretty clear this regime is not going to ever return to legitimacy. And their legitimacy is very dependent on this foreign support, and that's only going to last for so long. But I think that's where we are now.
Eric, do you believe that President Trump's relationship with the failed Marshal Asim Munir is a transactional relationship?
At most. I mean, it's at most a transactional relationship, if it's even that deep. I mean, we haven't seen him. I don't know that we've seen him say his name himself. He has said the field marshal. We've seen him say that. This is someone who is not going to have a deep personal relationship in that way with somebody like Asim Munir or Sharif. So yeah, it's, they're trying to, Rubio's goal is to essentially paint it as a transactional relationship, to get Trump thinking of it as a transactional relationship. But ultimately, I think people know that they're not going to be able to deliver on any of the transactional parts of the relationship, because they can't provide the security to do the type of long-term investment. They don't have the political stability to do that type of long-term investment. and that type of long-term investment in minerals, say, is not that lucrative in the first place without a major upfront cost. So yeah, no, I mean, I think he's thinking of it as a transactional relationship, and Rubio and others are just doing everything they can to keep Trump with a positive view of this regime, to avoid that moment that everyone is so afraid of, that Trump might say, hey, what happened about Imran Khan? I used to like that guy. And that's the main thing, that they're horrified that he might have that unexpected moment and that one comment. This regime is so fragile. I think everyone agrees. He makes that one comment, this regime would be on the rocks within seconds, basically.
So, Eric, talking about transactions, and since it is a transactional relationship, and since you're saying that Marco Rubio has been tasked to make it look like one as well, for obvious reasons, but the current transaction going on is in which the favorite field marshal has been tasked, and his puppet prime minister has been tasked to strike a favorable deal for Trump with Iran, in which it should look like that Trump has won and Trump should boost about it. And he has done that in the last 48 hours, and it has resulted very badly for Trump himself. Trump has been embarrassed, obviously. I mean, J.D. Vance, the U.S. vice president, goes to Islamabad, and obviously he must have had guarantees by the favorite field marshal Asim Munir that everything is all okay. You just come over here, sign the deal. I've sorted the Iranians out, but it ended in a deadlock. And now, further embarrassment that President Trump says that I'm sending my delegation to Islamabad, and they will talk to the Iranians, but the Iranians say that we are going to boycott the talk because you're not serious about it. So the transaction is not been completed in any of the deals so far, and any of the transaction has not been completed so far. So what is the future of Asim Munir under the circumstances, and what is the future of this transaction, in your opinion, about this Iran peace deal?
Well, yeah, and this has been a topic I've been really concerned about, over the last few weeks, because, for obviously your viewers, the Pakistani diaspora around the world and in the country know this is a deeply incompetent regime. It's shockingly incompetent. I mean, we've all studied a lot of different things that are called regimes, over the years. It's hard to find one that has this few skills, just with this tiny clique of people who are kind of shameless enough to be holding on to power despite clear lack. So all that to say is, it's become a huge concern that this incompetence, which has been harming 250 million Pakistanis, could now actually lead to something that is not impossible for it to turn into a world war. So that's been something I've kind of commented on a bit. Obviously, I think we all would love for there to be a positive role, even if it is from such an illegitimate, essentially murderous regime. If they could play a positive role here, we would all support that. I mean, my organization, we were founded actually to oppose the war on Iran back in 2006. So this is a high priority. But the problem is, when a regime like this has so little legitimacy, relies totally on that foreign support, which is why, as you mentioned, the Commonwealth report, they knew they couldn't release that report at the time, because again, the foreign legitimacy is what this regime lives on and needs. And so all that to say is that this regime is not going to be in a position to tell the United States the hard truths that it needs to tell. So like they're going to, for example, allow J.D. Vance to come over, give the impression that there's a possibility of a real agreement, without doing the hard work that you need to do to really make sure the sides are on the same page. And that involves telling hard truths to countries like the United States. But you're not going to do that if your primary goal is to appear relevant, which is, of course, their goal here. Seem relevant, seem like a major player, rehabilitate their image in the global in the global media and among the public, and also use that domestically. And so that's what I really fear where we are now, is that that's at worst, is that their incompetence, at best their incompetence is going to be a major problem. At worst, they could be being used by someone like the Rubio and the intelligence services to intentionally manipulate Iran and to set the stage for further breakdown in talks, which is another goal of some within the U.S. government. So that's my initial impression of it.
Eric, what is the sentiment in Washington, D.C. once recently we have been hearing about reports in Fox News that the U.S. intelligence community is taking Asim Munir, the favorite field marshal, as a red flag because he's got connections with the Iranian Republican Guard Corps, and he's got deep-rooted connections, obviously, there because he was the DG of the Inter-Services Intelligence. And what are the chances of this red flag materializing into becoming a scapegoat if the negotiations fail?
Yeah, I think it's my sense. I could see why some in the intelligence services, there could be some people who have a more more skeptical view of the Pakistani regime leadership. I think that the prevailing view in the United States among these sectors is that this is a regime that's very useful for U.S. interests because they're so desperate. It's incredibly easy to get them to do literally anything you want because they rely exclusively on that foreign legitimacy. So I can see why there is that kind of long-standing sense, like Pakistan doing double dealing, but I don't think that that's really what serious people think. I think serious people know this is a regime that China is not going to prop up this regime. China might work with them, but they will be just as happy or more happy to work with the government that has legitimacy as well. So it's this particular regime is in a desperate place. So I think that. Certainly any reasonable analyst can see it's not a competent regime. It's not a regime that can be trusted. But I think that this current, weakness of it, would make more people in Washington think that, this is going to be a regime that, if anything, is going to help. Because the basic concept is right now, there are obviously some people in Washington who, I'd say most people in the public would like a deal, would like this war to be over. But the Iran hawks, which predominate across the U.S. government, want this war to continue to escalate until Iran is fully destroyed and removed from the map as a problem. And so I think that's the really the battle is those such as J.D. Vance, who do have a political interest in a peace deal. That's also aligns with what the American people want as well, who don't care about this war. But then the majority of Washington does want to find a way to trap Trump into continuing to escalate so that this problem will be wiped off. So I think most people think that Pakistan will be helpful in kind of ensuring that any deal that comes out of it it essentially weakens or destroys Iran, or that they sabotage a deal altogether.
So that's very interesting analysis. I thank you for being very candid and honest about it. So Pakistan is being used as a Trojan horse under the circumstances. What you're telling me, that Pakistan is being used as a Trojan horse. But do you think Iranians are that stupid to trust him?
Well, that's a fear. Honestly, I've had that fear. I wonder whether whether Iran, fully is aware of kind of that dynamic. I would like to believe that they have that sophistication, but some of their statements have made me concerned that they might not be aware. So it's something that we need to better, investigate there. I don't have any kind of ability to directly communicate with anyone in the Iranian, leadership in any way, but I'd be curious what other analysts think about that. But I do, there are some Iranian, government linked, analysts that may have thoughts on that, but yeah, I would definitely caution Iran on that. I think so, Pakistan is.
Let me tell you something very interesting. And the Iranian analyst, London-based Iranian analyst, had sent me this quote. He said that remember that he sent me the Godfather movie quote. He said that Godfather told his son that whoever comes to you with the Barzini meeting is a traitor. Don't forget that. So Asim Munir, known as the Deceiver, even in his own military, that's the nickname he's got. This line, this is one of the line which endure because they carry hard truths. It has been stuck in the Iranians' mindset as well, and there is a lot of deep suspicion going on. So once the U.S. talks about completely destroying Iran, do you think it is possible under the circumstances to completely destroy Iran? Because destroying Iran would also destroy the global economy. It is already, the cost of living crisis in the rest of the world, even in the US, is phenomenal, and it cannot be ignored. But with President Trump going into his midterm in November, do you think that he would, obviously President Trump he wants a spectacular win for himself, but do you think it would be possible, and do you think they can really destroy Iran?
Well, I think, that's what some are hoping. I think it does come down to a question of how long Iran will be able to launch the missiles and drones in a way that does completely shut down the strait. I'm sure there are those who want to continue the war, who want to suggest that, Iran may not be able to continue that as long as they're suggesting. I think most reasonable people have to say, and I'm sure people close to President Trump say we can't take that risk, because if we do re-escalate the war and Iran does take that step to further devastate, the Gulf energy infrastructure, it could put us in. It could essentially lead to a global, depression or recession or depression that would effectively end Trump's presidency now. And so I think that's been the main thing that's pushed them towards talks, and that's been to Pakistan, Rawalpindi's benefit, because they're projecting that they're bringing the parties together. In reality, what's bringing the parties together is that there is no other military alternative that doesn't destroy the global economy and destroy Trump's presidency and his legacy. It would end his entire presidency, and it would end. You would have Democrats likely take Congress back, and you would have essentially Trump battling off impeachment. And the entire conversation would shift to 2028 immediately. And so, and that's been a pretty common dynamic we've talked about in the U.S. Political space, is that there are some hawkish Democrats who know their base would not let them destroy Iran in a war, but also do want it to be done, and they want Trump to get the blame for it. So that's kind of the dynamic. Is there's a lot of forces in Washington right now who do want to see Trump continue to be mired in this in a way that destroys him and also destroys Iran at the same time.
Well, all right, if wishes could be horses, as they say, but the thing is that right now, after 50 days of this war, the US might have, seriously degraded the Iranian military. The ground fact remains that Iran is able to strike back, and they obviously have got the Chinese support and the Russian support on their side. But that's a geopolitical question, and that is the great power rivalry, how it's playing. And this war is definitely playing as a role of a catalyst towards the decline of the US empire, or the unipolar world order for sure. Do you agree?
Well, yeah, I think most people thought, including Trump, that Iran would be pretty easy to take out, that they'd be much weaker. And I think what we may be seeing is something that I think is not too often reflected in the West, which is that Iran is not just a regime, a bad regime. This is a civilization. Even in China, obviously a civilization. Russia is even a civilization. So these are maybe bad regimes, but that's kind of a really short-sighted way to look at it. These are actually really incredible peoples that American people. I like a lot of, I like the American people as incredible diversity. It's not a civilization in the same way at all. And so, I think it is getting to an interesting place in the global, kind of in interesting moment in history where we're starting to come up against these wars against civilizations that have real history, real culture, real pride, and have some real ingenuity that comes with that. And I think that's been, so I think that'll be an interesting dynamic, and we'll have to see how it plays out. I think it's very much in play right now, how it's going to work out. But it does appear, as long as Iran can maintain that missile and drone threat over the Strait, that Trump has no option but to destroy his presidency or make a deal. I think those are the two options.
Eric, you've been working for restoration of democracy in Pakistan with the various American Pakistani organizations. And last time we talked, you said that, our job is to get democracy back on track in Pakistan and then hand it over to you. And that means bringing Imran Khan back into power. And I do understand that you're doing everything in your power to help us out over there. But the question is that, and the final question of this talk is that, why do you think President Trump went back on his words in which he said that Imran Khan is my friend? And we've been told by the Pakistanis, that the American Pakistanis, that the President Trump's camp has promised to bring back democracy in Pakistan, and that means the restoration of Imran Khan's government and respecting the public mandate. Why do you think he went back on his words?
Well, I think he's a person who, first of all, we know he's getting older. Okay. We're not sure how committed he was in the first place, but I think when something's not on the top of his mind, the way these things tend to work in Washington is the boss, whether they're a president, Congress member, senator, they have a lot going on, both in their personal lives and, of course, all their policy issues. And so the staff ends up having a lot of control. And so if the staff are not not mentioning Imran Khan to President Trump a single time, it's going to be pretty difficult for Trump to think of it on his own. He's got so many things he's thinking about. He doesn't have 1 second of thought that isn't occupied by someone coming to him with something, whether it's a staff person, a donor, whether it's his friend or, So I think I wouldn't say that he necessarily went back on it. It's just that it hasn't even been raised to him as an option. It's most likely a situation. Richard Grenell has been in a pretty highly publicized battle with Marco Rubio. They're very much on the opposite sides of the spectrum, with Grenell being much more about, restricting the U.S. role, making deals, and Rubio being about, U.S. hegemony, having complicated plans to ensure that the United States maintains its control of the world, militarily and otherwise. And so they're on but I think we've seen very clearly that, Rubio is a far more sophisticated operator, to say the least, than Grenell. Even if we agree with where Grenell is coming from a little more, Rubio is just infinitely more sophisticated. Rubio has shown himself to be one of the most sophisticated, hawkish operators, neoconservative operators in the history of the country. And so it's simple as that. And so Rubio is a staunch ally, could not be closer, in terms of with the Pakistani regime and propping them up. You could just look at the photos taken in the White House, in the Oval Office. He's gleeful at how well the meeting went with Asim Munir and Trump. So, and that's not just unique to him. I mean, we've seen that with Donald Liu and others, at State Department. This is a State Department deep state So that's essentially what happened. Is Marco Rubio, in his extreme sophistication of how to use levers of power, outworked Grenell. But we still have a number of ways to still bring this issue onto the agenda, which is by, particularly as the Democratic Congress, Democrats are going to retake the House, we can expect to see essentially the most high-profile votes on Pakistan human rights in history. That'll be coming up. It still feels like a ways off, but it will be coming off soon enough that we'll have these high-profile votes. Those votes will create media attention. That media attention will then get to President Trump, and will give him an opportunity to say, what happened to my old friend Imran Khan? Like, what is going on with this? So that's the kind of thing that we're building towards. The heartbreaking thing, obviously, is just to think of someone like Imran Khan, who did very clearly win the election, who is clearly the most popular person there, and to think of him suffering in jail for all this time. But that's essentially the state of play that we think we can bring attention back to the issue and get Trump to re-engage on it.
That's very interesting. So essentially what you're saying is that Trump has got so much on his plate that he's forgotten about Imran Khan. And that is also the success of the Pakistani regime, that they have lobbied Trump in a way, and Trump's staff in a way, that Imran Khan is not being brought up as a topic. And that is also, a success to the Pakistani regime, that they have been able to overpower the Pakistani diaspora in the United States and the various organizations which were at the forefront of this entire struggle in the beginning, like I don't want to name any organization, but obviously they have been overpowered or infiltrated in one way or the other. And the Pakistani regime has successfully, encircled President Trump into thinking that everything is, well, and it's all is well in Pakistan. So we are hoping for the best, but what is the best strategy for the American diaspora and for the, Pakistani diaspora abroad, which is a powerful diaspora, to take on this, the strategy? How should they go on about it, and how should they strategize about the particular movement of the restoration of democracy in Pakistan?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the right question to ask, because it's what all of us who care about seeing a truly free and sovereign Pakistan, that's what we're all thinking about. And the answer is essentially that we need to narrowly focus in on legislative efforts that have real teeth. I think there was a time, from me studying, learning about this community, there was a time, which is understandable, that a lot of the community felt really proud when people would give lip service. They'd say, we met with them, they listened to our concerns about the human rights violations. They told us they were going to stand with us, And I totally understand that sentiment, because people aren't used to the kind of games that get played in Washington. They assume, hey, someone heard me, they cared about me, they're going to do something for us. But then what you learn over time is that, unfortunately, the way that the U.S. empire is set up, they have ways to get around that. They say, well, we wanted to help, but you see, it's a complicated situation. So that's what we've seen with a number of these pieces of legislation that have been introduced. You may have seen House Foreign Affairs introduce legislation that we did analysis of it, and it was HR 5271. And you look at the bill, it says a lot of great stuff, but if you really break it down, all it does is require a classified report to be proposed, to be published within 6 months. It's just a classified report. And so this is the type of thing that they will do, is to say, look, we want to show support to the community, but we're not going to really turn the screws on this regime. And so that's what we're working on, is saying really simple stuff like you cannot get ongoing U.S. military training that this regime relies on if you do not commit to X, Y, or Z human rights conditions, basic stuff. So that's what we're really hoping the community will do, is to be, you could be grateful when people give you nice words and support verbally, but we really need to say, okay, now what is the binding legislation with teeth that's going to change the situation? And that's what where we're heading towards in the next, 6 months and a year.
Thank you so very much for your valuable time, Eric Sperling. We hope we'll be able to talk to you again, and we will pick up the same topic. And it's a very contentious situation right now. I do understand that the Pakistani regime currently is required for the U.S. to offer the Trump administration for a face saving. But again, as I say, that a deceiver can't be trusted, and you'll find it the hard way. President Trump will find it the hard way. That is what most of the Pakistanis are hoping. Thank you so very much, Eric.
Yeah, great to talk.